is going to be all about palette knives, and I'm really glad that you're here today. So in the world of palette knives, we have painting knives, and then there are also palette knives. And people will use the words interchangeably, and they're actually a similar kind of a thing, but there's a subtle difference with them. So I've got a handful of them here, and painting knives have a flat edge like this. And a palette knife has got a little bit of a hook in it. So if you can see that difference, the little bit of this hook that you see over here. And what I'm going to be doing is demonstrating for you on this, this acrylic painting. If you were here last week, I worked on this painting called the Matterhorn. And so this painting done all in acrylic, and I've started putting some of the texture on. And when it's all done, it's going to be completely covered in this live, wonderful texture that you see, very tactile. I'm touching this now. This is dry at this point, but this is all done in acrylics. So I have a few colors that are already mixed up. And if you are new to my channel, I welcome you. And if you're coming back, thank you so much for coming back. And hey, Rebecca, I see that you're here. So what happened was I had set up the other live stream, and then what ended up happening was, for some reason, it wasn't connecting. And so I could see you guys over there, but you guys couldn't see me. And so now hopefully we've got everything situated here. So I'm going to turn the camera a little bit, adjust that just so that we're nice and even. And let me know if you can hear, hopefully, Rebecca, you can hear my voice with the microphone and everything. So let's put a few of these palette knives. I want to demonstrate how I'm using these and also how to take care of them. If you've ever bought a painting knife or a palette knife, you'll know that you can get them in either plastic or metal, and I strongly suggest getting the metal ones over the plastic. The negative with plastic is the paint can stick on to the plastic, and then it will be really hard and difficult to get off. If you ever get paint on your palette knife or your painting knife, it's really easy. You just scrape it off like that and you can get it back off. And then, oh, and Helen, yes, Helen, thank you for coming over to this other stream. We had that's how it is with live, you know, technical difficulties. So I've got some acrylic paint mixed up over here, and I'm going to be demonstrating this for you. So let's just start now and get a little bit on here. I'm going to start, and what I'd like to do is put a curved feeling on here. So even though the paint was painted on with brushes, and this is totally dry now, but once I had painted it vertically, I would like to introduce some type of a curved element to get the idea of the sky and the movement, a little bit of air moving in through the sky. So let's start here with this lighter color, and I'm just going to apply it, and I'm just let it touch the canvas. And this is technically a painting knife because it's got the little curve on it. And if this is now they call that, they say that the reason that it's a painting knife is so that you don't get your knuckles full of paint. That's why this little curve is there. And then palette knife, really the intention of that is for mixing paint and moving paint around. But you can paint with palette knives, or you can paint with a painting knife. You can paint with either. So I'm just going to kind of establish a curve in here. And going live is too difficult. Yeah, I tell you, it is difficult being live with all of the different things that can go wrong. It's a lot. All right, so I'm just going to get a little bit of this texture started here at the bottom. So this technique is called Daubism for the thick slabs of paint, and it forms kind of a mosaic effect. And for those of you who participated in my community post, I had done a poll and asked you guys here if you could choose only one of these two palette knives to work with, to paint with for the rest of your life, which would it be? And the results, I checked the results right before coming on here, and it looked like I thought we had about 13 votes, and roughly 2/3 of the people had said that they'd like to use the this big knife, and then the rest of the people, I believe, were saying that they would like to use the smaller knife. And for those of you on the chat, let me know which one you would go with. Oh, and I see that Elf is here too. And so, yeah, a watermelon, Rebecca. It's like this large form. Just really feels to me like a giant mountain. And so I want to try and get that feeling here. So when I'm putting the color on, I'm going to try and keep the bands of color similar to what we have already on the painting. And I'm using this really narrow knife, just scooping it up and putting it on delicately, just lightly. And I'm being careful not to let, since this is super wet paint, I'm being careful not to let the paint brush one onto the other. So let's get this wiped off over here. And for those of you who have used palette knives in the past, or painting knives, and I'll show you, I'll demonstrate with this little guy here. The way to care for them is actually, it's pretty straightforward, but there is one trick. And the trick with this is that you do not want to let the paint dry, if at all possible. Don't let the paint dry on the tool. Try and wipe it off or get it cleaned off as soon as you can. And then the other trick is do not, this is called the ferrule. This is like on a paintbrush, you know, like a paintbrush has a ferrule. Let me grab a paintbrush here. So you've got like the wooden handle, and then you've got this metal bar that goes between the handle and the bristles on a brush. Same thing with a palette knife or painting knife. You've got a wooden handle, and then a ferrule, and then a metal piece. You don't want to let this part ever get wet, or this part get wet. This part can get wet on metal, and it's no problem at all. And so what I'll even do too is I'll even just, you know, dip this into, I've got a little bucket of water. I'll let it just sit in water, and I've got it sit up. I've got enough water in here that the metal blade gets wet, but not so much that the ferrule ever gets wet. And then I'll dry it off on a paper towel in between. But just applying this color and getting a sense of motion, like the air is moving around in the sky. So I'm intending to send this painting to Canyon Road Contemporary, and the gallery that represents me in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And they've sold several of the watermelon series before, but I have never done one with a curved approach. So I am excited to see how the public receives it, how it does. We'll get a little mark here. So I'm doing this curved shape here, and then let's also just try and reinforce this thing. I'm going to put a large mark over here. So I developed this technique called Taoism in the year 2000. What happened was I was working on a painting and just doing a typical smooth painting, and ended up having a problem with where it wasn't coming out. And I got frustrated, and I'm like, oh, let me put some paint over here. And I ended up just putting a bunch of paint everywhere. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of like this effect of this super thick effect here. I kind of like how that's coming out. So I ended up exploring and doing more. And at first, all of the marks were just tiny and just kind of scattered all over. And then over the years, I've gotten this idea of creating a sense of motion. So that's something that you can do in your knife work that is difficult to do on just a flatly painted thing, is that you can get texture going and you can create a sense of motion through that texture. Okay, so let's see what you guys are saying. So Helen is saying, I prefer the larger knife because you can use the edge or the tip of the large knife if you need to make smaller or thinner strokes. And you know what, Helen, you are right on. So Helen is my mother, and she was my first teacher, and still is my teacher. But she's really right on about that. So let's get a mark. I mixed up a color that was halfway between the lightest and the darkest. I'm going to try and get a transition of color here towards the bottom of our horizon. And let's put a few marks here as well. Just trying to think of the idea of this swirling effect. All right, so you might see me reaching off to the side here, and I'm periodically wiping off. I'm wiping off onto a paper towel, so I'll just dip that in here. And this is a way to keep the palette clean. And then now that I've just dipped this in the water, I can keep it clean, and so then the knife is super nice and clean. One thing too is these blades are stainless steel, and I see I've got a little crud on this one. The blades are stainless steel, so they're not going to rust on you. But again, you could get a problem if you got water up in here, because then it could make the wood swell, and that's not good. So you want to make sure to always keep your water just, or your paint, just try and keep it up from there and not any further. And so yeah, motion is great, Helen. When you can get a sense of motion in your work, it feels really good. All right, so I've got a little bit. I'm going to reach over here. I have actually 2 palettes of paint. I've got another set of paint here. Let's just dip into this. This is French ultramarine blue with a little bit of white added. Let's get a couple of marks also up over here at the top of our sky. And again, a sky is one of those things where you can do your sky to be convincing as a sky. Is if you think about your horizon, the lightest color, if you go outside and you look up, the sky is blue, but it's a different kind of blue depending on where you're looking. If you're looking straight up, it's more of a purpley dark blue, like an ultramarine blue. And then if you look closer to the horizon, especially if it's near dawn or dusk, there's going to be more yellow, more white, and the blue is going to be a darker blue, or not darker blue, a lighter blue, but more of a yellowy blue. So I'm using 2 different blues here. I've got, let me get the paint here. So we have ultramarine blue, and then also have, where did he go? Phthalo blue red shade. Here, let's see. Yeah, phthalo blue red shade is the other color. But with these 2 blues, we can make just wonderful additions. You can add yellow to it. You can add purple. In fact, let's do that now. Let's add a little bit of, if I take one of these colors, so let's say this color that we want here in this part of the sky. This is just phthalo blue red shade with a little bit of white. But if I add a little bit of this diarylide yellow, for example, we can get more of a green effect. And this makes a nice nuanced green, greeny blue. So let's put that on our canvas as well. I try and have as many varieties of colors possible, make variations. Because just like in nature, not everything is one color, and if you come back and look at it later, it's going to be yet another color. Okay, and Alpha, I appreciate that you're here, and I appreciate that you're all watching, and if you're watching later in the upload, I appreciate you. Also be watching. There's going to be an announcement for an art challenge coming up. I'm going to be making an announcement next week, and I'm hoping that as many of you can participate as possible. It's going to be a great one. All right, so let's get a few more marks on here. And if you're watching later on the upload, let me know in the comments, or you can let me know now, what if you have a painting knife, a palette knife, what is your favorite one to use? I've also used spoons. Let me get these back out here, but I've also painted using the back of a spoon, so I'll show you what that looks like. Basically just gaining the paint on the spoon. So there's a lot of different things that you can use to paint. The spoon is going to leave a very soft, rounded form on the canvas. And I enjoy getting a variety of different marks on, so I feel like that also adds some interest to have a variety of different things. All right. So let's also demonstrate and show you what this tiny little guy here, this little needle-like one, this tiny little fella, I'll show you what he can do. Then I'll also show you, I'll demonstrate for you the thing. Let me get this little guy. Let's just put a little mark up here. Let's get some of the green. So here's the green. Let's just get a little bit of that going. So look at these little forms that you can make with a tiny, tiny knife. You can really get some nice detail if you wanted to have detail in your work. But that thing makes just a tiny little mark. Kind of like my little dog Scrunchy, who is just, she's a little 3.5 pound Yorkie, but she is small but powerful. All right, so let's actually put a little bit of that green also up in the sky, because why not? We'll get a little green going up here as well. There we go. All right, and then I also want to just show you quickly here what you can do with this big thing. So look at this big monstrosity of this is technically a palette knife because it's just flat all the way through, but you can use these big knives for mixing, but you can also just move a tremendous amount of paint. As you can see, you can do, if you're mixing very large puddles of things, you can mix and then get those on. And you can also use them to paint. So let's see, I'll show you. You can make like a very thin line with that. It doesn't bend hardly at all. The difference, that's another thing too, between a palette knife and a painting knife. Typically they make a palette knife so it's got a little bit more spring. You see how that moves a little bit? And this blade is not, it moves very slightly, but it's meant to be very stiff, and then this is meant to have some spring, so when it touches your paper or your canvas, it will move for you. All right, so I want to thank you guys for showing up today, and I apologize for the technical technical difficulty I had on that on the first live stream, and then had to restart and everything. And I appreciate for those of you that came over. We had a bunch of people on it, and then a bunch of you have come back over, and I appreciate you. So, so I want to say thank you, and I hope to see you again soon. And until next time, it's Dena Tollefson, and all my best to you. Bye-bye.